Hi there. Thanks for tuning in. Want to talk with you a little bit today about the emotional eating that you're doing, which is not something that you would like to do, and your story. Yep, your story. Nobody else, your story. And what do I mean by that? What is the story that you continue to tell yourself? What do you repeat over and over and over again? In every situation, whether you are home alone, whether you are at work, whether you are with friends, referring to it, you meet new people who ask you who you are. What's that story? Excuse me. What's that story that you keep repeating over and over? Which is actually a story, excuse me, which is actually a story that you don't want to tell anymore. You've been telling that story for a long time. You're miserable. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this video, because you want to get rid of that emotional eating, that binge eating, that bulimia, that anorexia. It's all the same. It's all the same thing. It is, the anxiety, the depression. What's the story? Now, let me step next to that, and then I'll make the connection for you again. Maybe you've heard the expression, repetition is the mother of learning. So for those of you who have children, who raised children, are raising children, or those of you who are the older sibling, and perhaps you had or you still have a younger sibling, but especially those who have grandchildren. What did you like to hear from your child? The most important thing is you wanted to have the child learn to speak, and specifically say like mama or dada. Well, how was that working? What did you do? What do you see other people do who have a little child? Even a little toddler. What do you see people do? What happens in those situations? And I like to suggest to you that you observe those situations. Specifically, quite easily, when you're shopping in the supermarket and you see a mom or a dad with a small child, just eavesdrops a little bit. Just listen and what's happening there? What's happening? Especially when the child is young and it's pointing out on all these things. What is the parent doing, or the caregiver? It could be a grandparent, it could be whatever. But for the easy sake, let's just call it a parent, father or a mother. What does the parent do? Repeat, repeat, repeat. What is the parent actually doing with the child? It's helping the child create neural pathways, aka wires. That is a little bit like what a spider does in the web. A spider makes a thread, makes a wire connection from one point to the other. And spiders are not stupid, so they usually don't go along the same line, but they just go a little bit higher and then jump back. A little bit higher, then jump back. They fortify that connection, and later on they just go like that. And if you ever want to learn more about spiders, fascinating, fascinating, fascinating animals. So by repeating, and this is what you learned in school yourself, also when you were older, and especially if you want to learn something by heart, without having a piece of paper in your hand, like a speech, like a talk, or whatever, eulogy. You repeat it over and over and over again. You wire that in your brain. Nowhere else, in your brain. Do your research and you will find out. But let's jump back to your situation. You're binge eating, you're overeating, you're emotional eating. And you have built a story around that. And you embellish the story, because that's usually what it is. A story is just usually gets bigger, gets worse, gets better. B-A-D-D-E-R, more bad. And it got that way because you keep telling your story over and over and over. But what happens to you with that story? You have wired, you have created neural pathways of that story. And it's very hard to break that. And you don't know how to break that, but you can. Absolutely you can, because here's the thing, and think about this for a moment. You were not born with that story, yeah? You didn't wake up with and I don't know where I have it, a flash drive in your hand or a piece of paper in your hand and said, here's my story. Mom, Dad, here's my story. No. You created that story along the way while you were every day adding a day to your life and exposed to whatever your environment, your surroundings was feeding you. Whether you realize that or not, whether they, the environment, it realized that or not. So you started to create new wires in your brain. And it's beautiful to create wires for language, certain language. But when it comes to a out of whack story that you repeat over and over and over again, it is so ingrained that the story is you. And the story might be completely based on a lie, on something that's false, that's something that's pulled out of context because you didn't know any better. Yes, I am not discounting, diminishing the trauma you probably went through. And trust me, you are not alone. I think it's 85 or 90% of every family is dysfunctional, has trauma in it, especially in the early period of a child's life. It could be worse, it could be less, but we all have trauma and we all learn to cope with that. And if we don't, we create a story around it to make it easier for ourselves to deal with it because it's bloody painful. I used the story. You could also call a story excuses. It's about the same. An excuse. I am this way because. And this is my story. Because. Here's the thing. You're watching this video now. That means you are probably an adult because this is restricted for children. So you are aware of you being alive. You are thinking. You are watching this. You're hearing this. And hopefully it gets some wheels turning within you. The story that you keep repeating is the story that is based on the facts, the situations that took place in your early childhood. And I have a surprise for you. And you may want to think about that. You're not that 3-year-old anymore. You're not that 5-year-old kid anymore. You're an adult. What does that mean? That means that you can make rational decisions to change that story, to get help from a therapist like me who helps you change that story. Unless you love that story and you want to continue to keep it alive because it gets you the attention for all the wrong reasons, gets you to cop out of a lot of situation. Think about what you cannot or do not do in your life right now. Write it on a piece of paper. You have to see it. Write it on your piece of paper. What are you not doing right now that you would love to do, but because of your story, you're not doing it? Wouldn't you say it's time to change that story? To get rid of that story? To create a new story? An empowering story? Rewire the brain? And it's possible. It's totally possible. But you are the only one who can make the decision to change your life, your story. And will that old story be still playing a role? No. Because here's the thing. When you have two plants, whatever, an orchid and another orchid, and you just feed one water every day, or however much it needs to get, I don't know. One will blossom and grow, and the other one will just simply die off. This is exactly the same. The Native Americans call it, which of the wolves are you feeding? Who are you feeding? What are you giving energy to? Because where energy goes, your focus goes, that's what you focus on. That's what you create. You see, creation is concentrated energy. So what are you focusing on? Your story? How's that working for you? Isn't it time to change it? Wouldn't you like to change it? Wouldn't you love to have a different life? With no painful misery in your life? No binge eating, no cravings, no anxiety, no depression. I am not saying that this is an overnight cure. Absolutely not. But relatively fast, you can get out of emotional eating. Once you know the root cause. Can you do that yourself? Not really. Takes a long, long time and huge dedication. Why? Because you have to go back to the situations and review them, and you might just discover a couple of very painful situations that are not your fault because you were a child. You didn't have logic. You couldn't say no. You had no idea. You were only emotions. So it's not your fault. That's why you have parents who raise you. Grandparents, caretakers, whatever. And you just hope and pray they do the very best, lovingly, with you as a child. Unfortunately, a lot goes wrong. You cannot blame everything on them because they are also doing what they have been taught, presuming that is what you need to do with your life. However, you want to do it differently, and they don't know how you want to do it differently. So you have, as a child, you have a conflict. And they don't know that. Nor do you. That only plays out later in life when you see like, this isn't really working for me. My life sucks. And then you can do two things. You can go to Facebook groups and bitch and gripe and moan with the same gang who is in the same position. You can do that. Discover you're not alone and go like, okay. Or this is wonderful, wonderful. But if you say like, okay, you can start looking around for a therapist. You can turn to me. I'm a coach, I'm a therapist. I can help you. Or you just can continue to keep up your story because there are certain benefits from keeping up your story. Living the life in that story. And that's all up to you. If you want to make changes, direct message me. I'm available. Just direct message me. I send you the link for my calendar and we can talk for free. Introduction, conversation. And then we can figure out if we are a match and if it's going to work, you and I working together. So in the meantime, thank you for listening. The disclaimer, this is everything that I have learned from my fantastic mentors. Put it in the blender, put my own sauce over it, serving it to you, hoping that it will help you. If you like it, click the like button. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button or pass it on to anybody pass it on to anybody who you feel might benefit from my content. And the last, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. That's up to you, not up to me. I'm not here to please the whole world, but I appreciate you anyway. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.